Welcome back to Behind the Caution Tape. I'm your host, CrashLit. This is a very special episode of the show, as today I am really honored to be joined by 1994 Olympic gold medalist and current Tordrillo Mountain Lodge heli-guide, Tommy Mo. Make sure to follow him on Instagram at Tommy Mo Tordrillo. And it's super excited to be doing this, especially because Tommy, this is my first time ever doing like a live guest interview like this. Most of them are over Zoom. And two, we're doing it here in the Tordrillo Mountains in Lodge 2 of TML. So I'm really excited. So thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
My pleasure. It's I've skied with your parents over the years, snowboarded up here in Alaska with them, and it's pretty special to actually have you guys come up and ski with us this week. We've had fantastic conditions. We got out 3 days and had some nice big mountain skiing, and love riding Alaska with families and friends from California and showing them some of the best skiing of their life.
Absolutely. Before we get into the questions I've planned, I do want to ask you actually, what's that been like skiing with my parents over the years? Because while I have not had the pleasure of getting be guided by you this week, I bet they have some stories. I'd love to hear what's like been skiing with them.
Yeah, for sure. I think the best one was probably snowboarding with Wendy and Doug, your parents, and then also Laird Hamilton. We were up in the mountains here in Alaska and had perfect snow, perfect conditions. And I was snowboarding also actually when I went out that day because I ski and snowboard. But primarily when I guide up in Alaska, I mostly ski. But snowboarding is just one of those sports. I grew up skateboarding a little bit, and I do some wake surfing and different sports. So I love the fact that I do both sports.
Yeah. When did you take up snowboarding? Like at what point in your life?
I started, back in the 80s. My brother got a Burton back hill. And so I remember putting on the boots and the bindings and not really getting it very quickly. But after about, 3 or 4 tries, I was snowboarding and I figured out my stance, and I still snowboard, a couple times each season.
Gotcha. And now I do want to ask you more about your skiing because that's what you are known for, especially with your big Olympics in '94. We'll get to that later. But I want to start to you. What kind of got you into skiing and how old were you?
I grew up skiing in Montana. My dad was an avid skier. He was a ski patrolman and ski instructor, but he never raced. So my brother and I, when we were growing up in Montana, we'd go to the mountain every weekend. It was awesome because, we'd go up on the mountain and we'd be at the club. And then if not, we'd be free skiing and hitting jumps and just terrorizing this one ski area. It used to be called Big Mountain, and now it's called Whitefish Mountain Resort. And so we had some jumps that were, not man-made, and they were actually really big jumps, and we used to send it when we were younger, and I got into racing at a pretty young age in Montana, and then just fell in love with it. Whether I was free skiing or racing, just loved the sport, and I was lucky enough to compete on the national team for a number of years.
And then what was that like, obviously, growing up where you were in Montana? It seems like kind of just skiing and racing is a big part of the culture of just where you were. So what was that kind of like for you, just getting into racing?
In Montana back in the 80s and 90s, it was pretty much just ski racing and then powder skiing. And now it's different because a lot of kids can go slope style, they can go big mountain, they can go racing, skier cross, and there's a lot of different facets to the sport of skiing now because a lot of the kids, don't really want to race. Maybe some of them just want to do freestyle, and it's pretty cool to actually have different avenues for kids to go down and try to pursue a future in skiing.
And what made you stay with it even when, times got tough or just you weren't maybe going as fast as you were hoping or just things weren't working out the way you were hoping? What made you just stay with it over the years, Tommy?
That was the tough part. I had some ups and downs in my career. And when I was a teenager, I made the national team when I was pretty young. I was 17 years old. And we traveled all throughout the world when I made the national team: New Zealand, Australia, even for skiing, Japan, Europe, Chile, Argentina. And there was a lot of races where I didn't do that well. And I think the thing that helped me the most was probably just sticking with it, the perseverance of not giving up, because in your life, if you give up, you're not going to attain the goal that you want. And in my career as a ski racer, I lost a lot more races than I won.
It seems like that's probably true of everyone, though.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask, what was it like being 17 and then debuting in the World Cup?
When I made the national team when I was 16, I started racing on the World Cup the next season. And in '87, I raced my first World Cup in Garmisch, Germany, and got my butt kicked. I was like 4.5 seconds out, and then I raced on some Europa Cups, and it was a pretty big learning curve from the time I was 17 and 18, 19. I raced World Cup, and I didn't really have my first podium in World Cup till I was like 23. So I put in my dues for 6, 7 years before I even made the top 10 or top 5.
And I'd also like to ask you, what was it just like competing in the World Championships year after year, just throughout like your career?
The World Cup was the main tour that I raced on, but the World Championships happen every 2 years, and they're usually in some big ski resort in Europe or in the North America. And if you win that title, you're world champion. But the Olympics are every 4 years, and if you win that, you're the Olympic champion. So the Olympics for me were always just a really cool goal that I had to actually compete, and I got lucky enough to do well and win a couple medals.
So obviously you were in the Olympics 3 times, 1992, 1994, and 1998. I do really want to ask you now about the 1994 Olympics, when that was probably one of the highlights of your career,
Yeah.
when you got gold in the downhill and silver in the Super G. So just what was just that like, the environment, all of it, just like the racing, just what was just that whole experience?
Yeah, that it was kind of a crazy time, especially because I was an underdog. I didn't really expect myself to win a gold, but before those races, I had some podiums in World Cup. I'd been second and third in some big races on the World Cup tour, and sure enough, like right before the Olympic year, I had a few more podiums at Whistler and Bormio, and then I went into the Olympic season and was in the top 10 in the world, and I knew that I could actually win a big race. But I'd been second in a couple World Cups, but never won one. And then sure enough, the Olympics came around that year, and I was just like, this is it. Either I'm going to win or I'm going to crash. Like your name.
So I love hearing that, just especially experience, especially after you talking about it yesterday when you did the presentation and showed those two videos to us yesterday in Lodge 1. But now I do want to ask you, obviously that was your second Olympics.
Sure.
What did you learn from 2 years prior in the 92 Olympics that helped you, understand what you were kind of walking into this time? Like, how was it different in that regard? But how were you able to like use that prior Olympic experience to help you this time?
Well, the first Olympics was 1992 in Albertville, France, and I knew that I was a contender, but I'd never really won a big race before that. And I was 22 years old and hadn't really matured physically and mentally, and so I had high expectations, but I couldn't really perform to my fullest because I wasn't quite strong enough. As a skier, you gotta be pretty strong to be able to hold the turn and carve the skis and actually carry your speed all the way down to the bottom. It's like doing 2 laps around a track and running as hard as you can. So it's like a 2-minute race, and you got to be super strong. And when I started the 93 season, I was in the best shape of my career. I'd actually put on a little bit of weight. I was like 205 pounds and was super confident mentally and physically. And I think I matured as a human and as an athlete. And then when I went to Lillehammer, I was like, this is my chance. And I may never have this chance again. So I'm going to throw down the best run I can. And when I look back on it now and even show my run on video, it's like, it's a pretty special moment because everybody else had a little mistake, and I didn't really have any mistakes on that run.
What's that like, just having to be, I guess, in order to like get a podium or even win it, just being, how do you just like that mentality, just having to be pretty much just perfect and flawless in it?
Especially in ski racing, you have to just have a really good mental picture, like a mindset to where you're super focused on the course itself, because if you perform and go out and execute it at that time, you're going to be fast. But if you think about what place you're going to get or who you're going to beat, your mind's already in the other lane. So it's a very mental sport. I'd say more than 50% of it's all upstairs, and you have to just trust yourself and go full tilt and not really worry about the time. Just try to really execute in those 2 minutes to perfection.
That's really impressive to hear. And then now I do want to ask you, like, what are some other like just memorable moments from your skiing career?
Oh, I'd probably say that the best one was after I did well at the Olympics. I went up to Whistler, Canada, and actually backed it up and won another World Cup Super G event. And then I got second at Whistler and ended up third overall in the World Cup Super G title, or the World Cup Super G standings that year, and had a pretty good season. I got a silver medal in the Super G that same season and a bunch of podiums, and it was a dream come true.
And then obviously later in your career, you dealt with injuries. What did you learn from those experiences, and how did you just persevere through them, especially kind of going back? to kind of what we were talking about earlier?
I think the hard part for me was '94. I had a great season, won a couple of Olympic medals, and did well in the World Cup. And then the next year I came around and I actually had been skiing pretty well, like getting top fives and top tens, and I think I had one or two podiums. But then I went back to Norway where I had done well in the downhill and actually crashed at the bottom in a little section called Tommy Moe's Corner, and that was the hard part, just because I knew that I blew my knee out and it was major setback. Had to go get surgery on my knee, and I never really came back from that.
And then ultimately, just in part because of injuries, you decided to retire in 1998. What was it like for you just kind of realize that it was just, I guess, time for you to just, end that chapter and just start a new chapter in your life as well as your career?
That was a little bit tricky. When I went back to the Olympics in Japan in '98, I was 8th in the Super G and 12th in the downhill, and I missed a medal by half a second and was kind of bummed. And I just been traveling and racing for 12 years straight, pretty much from '87 until '98. So I was like, what? I think I need to start like do something new. And we ended up starting Tordrillo Mountain Lodge and Chugach powder guides and doing some heli-skiing and rafting and Kings and Corn. And I've been doing that for almost 30 years now, these trips in Alaska.
Wow. And before we get into more about the startings of TML, I do want to ask you, what was it like when you found out in 2003 that you were being inducted into the National Skiing Hall of Fame?
Pretty special. Up in Michigan, they do have a Ski Hall of Fame where I think there's over 500 members. And when I was the class of 2003, and I was super honored. I flew up to Michigan and went to the ceremony with a few other inductees, and it's pretty neat because it's almost like a museum. They have a photo of each person that's inducted, whether it was freestyle or racing or did something for skiing as a filmer like Warren Miller and all these other people, and Bob Biatis and Bill Meroltz and Phil Mayer. I mean, the list goes on, and I was honored to actually get inducted to Ski Hall of Fame. It's great.
Congrats. It was super really cool to hear about both you, as well as when I came across it as I was doing my research for this interview today.
That's right. I've been lucky enough to live in Jackson Hole, and I have two daughters that are 16 and 15, and they both free ski and ride and race, and I just love trying to keep up with them now because they're both so good, and they're getting into racing and free skiing, so it's awesome.
What's that like, skiing with your kids now, kind of just watching them grow up and getting kind of experience some of those moments with them, even if it's maybe not in the same way, or just seeing them kind of grow up, get fast?
It's pretty exciting. I think it's a full circle. I'm so happy that my kids love to ski, and we go out and ski powder in Jackson Hole in February and January when it's good, and just watching them race, though, it's pretty intense. Now I know what I put my dad through. I get a little nervous. So I'm like, oh my God, don't crash. You're going way too fast.
Do you think it probably also helps that you talked about yesterday, you met your wife through skiing as well, and she also is, competing in the same events as you around the same time? Do you think that also kind of helps them also do it, knowing that kind of the high standard that both of their parents set, just being,
right. That's a good question. It's tough boots to fill because my wife, Megan, was actually a 2-time Olympic skier and raced on the World Cup for 10 years. And it's hard I think for my kids, because some of their friends know that their parents were skiers, but they don't really remember it, of course. But the fact that my kids love to ski is the best thing that I can enjoy in my life, and being able to ski and hit jumps and even go to their races. I do a lot of their races now, so I'm hanging out with the other dads that are and moms that are at the events, and it's a blast.
And then I do want to now ask you about starting Tordrillo Mountain Lodge. So what was that like, starting that business with Mike Overcast,
right?
But then also, still, balancing, kind of, raising a family.
We started Tordrillo Mountain Lodge in 2006. Initially, the trips that we did out here were called Kings and Corn. So it was king salmon fishing and corn snow heli skiing. And we came out here the first year and actually kind of scouted it out, did some recon, and said there's great corn skiing and there's epic fishing right in these rivers. And we ended up the first year only having 4 guests, and then the next year there was 8 guests, and then Now we do Kings and Corn in the summer, and it's 5 sessions of 5 days, and and then in the winter we do heli-skiing trips that are 7 days. And our summer business is doing really well now because we have via ferrata, rafting, fishing, hiking, and it's so cool to actually show people, this part of Alaska, South Central, and the mountains and the rivers are unmatched and some of the prettiest in the world.
And then what's that been like, obviously, growing the business? What have you learned of, yes, just being, both an entrepreneur and also a heli guide now, and, obviously, doing these incredible trips, including, the one that I'm fortunate to be on this week.
That's right. It's pretty amazing. We, if you come to Alaska and hit it when the snow's right, it's some of the best skiing in the world. And the the guests that would come up to Alaska have been here and experienced it, at least most of them, and they end up coming back, which is super special. And whether it's winter or summer, it's one of those places that is one of the best in the world.
I can back that. I mean,
Right.
and especially like my parents have been coming for years, and they've recently
they-
been super grateful, obviously, that they've brought me and my brother along for the last few years as well. So
That's
it's been
so cool.
obviously
That's so cool.
fun to just be on these trips. But then, what have been some of your most rewarding moments or memories just from your time working as a guide?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think one of the biggest things is I've had a lot of people say that was the best day of my life. Whether you're in the mountains and it's great snow and everything comes together, and just being safe and showing people the terrain and the food and the hot tubs and the saunas, and we meet a lot of really nice people. A lot of our guests are people that come every couple years or every year, and so the moments that you have when it's world class are hard to beat.
Absolutely. I got a few more questions for you, Tommy,
Sure,
and then.
sure.
But yeah, my next question for you is just what's like the best advice you've gotten throughout your life, and it can be just applicable to anything.
I think the best advice that I've got in my life is work hard, play hard. I think my dad was a pretty hard worker. He was one of my inspirations growing up, just because he stuck behind me, showed me the way, um, got me into skiing, got me into outdoors, mountain biking and fishing and rafting, and now I do the same with my kids. I try to get them to work hard, believe in yourself, go out and ski and race if you'd like, and um, try to be a good sport. Try to be good sportsmanship. I think that's super important. Is having good ethics and believing in yourself. And there's a lot of things that skiing does. It teaches you a lot about yourself because you're the one out there enjoying it. And whether you're competing or just having fun, it's unmatched.
Absolutely. And then what's the best advice you have to anyone who they see you out, they see like you competing in the Olympics, or you're working as their guide for them during a heli week.
Right.
What's the best advice you have to them if like they aspire to be like you?
I think a lot of times I meet people up here, and it's pretty much just we're trying to find the best snow we can and be the safest that we can. But after my ski career, I was like, what am I going to do? And I started getting into guiding along with Mike Overcast, and we started this business. And now we have a bunch of guides. We have 6 or 8 guides, and everybody's different. But the best advice I say is just enjoy the moment. Go out and ski and have fun, and try to just enjoy when it's good powder skiing, because people love powder skiing, whether it's snowboarding and in fresh untracked lines in Alaska, and when the sun's out and you're on a big mountain and it's perfect conditions, it's hard to explain how much fun it is. And I still really enjoy like showing people like super safe but really good quality experience on snow.
Thank you so much, Tommy, for joining me today. That's going to do it for us. And I know this was a very unusual episode for Behind the Caution Tape, but I think that it was really great to hear from Tommy today because, as many of you know, I am part of the USC Ski and Snowboard Club back at school.
Yeah, buddy.
So I think also is great for that as well. Just Tommy being an Olympic medalist, I think that just also ties into the very high standard of just Olympic athletes and medalists at USC. So I think it ties in really well, actually, with the theme of the show, more than I guess I could have initially thought when
awesome.
everyone saying,
cool.
"Oh, you need to interview Tommy." But I think it was
awesome, right?
Super great. So that's going to do it for us here on Behind the Caution Tape. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for this episode. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed. Make sure to follow Tommy at TommyMo Tordrillo. Make sure to follow me at CrashLit. and I'll see you all Monday for the Monday Rundown. Fight on.
Fight on.